There was a solid chunk of time where zombies were all the rage and the apocalyptic genre just was shooting through the roof. I remember back in college, around 2012 or so, me and my friends, we were watching zombie movies, playing zombie games together, and, well, I guess that's actually about it. But either way, zombies were super popular around that time, and that's why nobody was surprised when Naughty Dog came out with The Last of Us. Now, this post-apocalyptic game featured infected instead of zombies, and in 2013, it was a critical hit. Everybody loved it. Everybody thought it was a great game. So 7 years later, it's not really a surprise that we have a sequel, The Last of Us Part 2. I'm going to take a look at this game, and there are going to be some spoilers. I'm going to tell you now, there are some spoilers in this review. Not endgame stuff and not overarching story stuff, but some of the early game stuff, some of the mid-game stuff. I'm going to be touching on some of that. So, just a warning for you, if you don't want to hear about that stuff, I'd advise looking away now. But, like I said, I'm going to take a look at The Last of Us Part 2 and see where it ends up on my game list. The story in The Last of Us Part 2 picks up about 5 years after the events of the first game, with Joel and Ellie pretty cemented into the town of Jackson. However, a subgroup of a group known as the WLF, or Wolves, comes to Jackson with the goal of killing Joel, and they succeed. This leads Ellie to Seattle with her girlfriend Dina, where she tries to hunt down each member of this group across Seattle to avenge the death of Joel. Overall, Ellie's part of the story has a lot of nuance to it and really shows what revenge can do to someone. This part of the game is pretty much pure revenge focus, and it's pretty intense. Now you'll notice I say this part and Ellie's part, and that's because you play the second half of the game as Abby, a member of the subgroup of wolves who killed Joel. This is an interesting part of the game as it's almost completely detached from Ellie and what she's doing. Instead, this focuses on what the wolves are doing, how they're trying to build a sanctuary, and how they're trying to battle the other faction in the city, the Scars. This is completely different from Ellie's point of view in this game, as Abby's goal is to help others and try to do the right thing by her and her friends. Overall, I think both halves of the story are really good, and that this game features a really cohesive story, so I'm going to give it 87 points. The main part of the gameplay for The Last of Us Part 2 is encounters. Encounters is kind of a catch-all term, however, for whenever you are around enemies, and these encounters can actually vary quite a bit. First, there are the enemy types, as you face either infected or normal humans. The infected encounters typically involve a lot more sneaking around, as the infected have no fear about coming up to you and trying to bite your actual face off. There are standard infected, which you can fight off decently. Then there are clickers, which, well, they're more of the bite your face off types. There are also big infected, like bloaters, which explode nasty stuff on you that damages you, or shamblers, which are basically mini bloaters that have a similar effect, but less health. Either way, you're going to be typically stealthy going from infected to infected, trying to kill them silently so as not to alert the rest. You won't be able to stealthily kill all of them though, so then it's running to hide or just unloading your shotgun on them as best as you can. Human encounters can go one of two ways. You can do a similar stealth approach, hiding and taking out the enemies when convenient. This is actually a little bit easier compared to the infected because it's easier to drag these human enemies around and kill them, and they don't really try to go for face biting. The other way to tackle human encounters is a good old-fashioned firefight. You get various guns throughout the game, and now is the time to use them. Be careful though, ammo as well as all other materials in this game are limited. So while you might want to throw a Molotov at a human enemy, you might need it for a big bad infected later. The rest of the time when you aren't in encounters is typically exploring and going through story stuff, which is fun and can even sometimes have some light platforming. Otherwise, you're pretty much searching for ammo, collectibles, or resources. Like I mentioned, you can craft items such as Molotov cocktails, and the resources to do this are pretty scarce, so resource management is a pretty big deal in this game. Especially in the harder difficulties, a big part of it besides increasing enemy difficulty is decreasing the amount of resources you have available to you, making resource management even more important. Overall, with the main encounter gameplay mixed with some of the crafting and exploring, I find fun. Although resource management can be a bit of a grind in this game. With all of that being said, I'm going to give gameplay 81 points. As I mentioned before, in this game there are collectibles that you can find while exploring all across Seattle. These typically are going to be notes, trading cards, or coins. The coins are, well, coins. They're like half of the state's worth of coins, and yeah. The trading cards are pretty cool though. It's like this whole trading card universe, and I think there's some sort of game, but the rules are never fully explained, and you can't actually play the card game in The Last of Us Part 2, so I guess that goes to the wayside. The notes, however, are so widely varied. Sometimes it's a simple log of items to get, but sometimes it's a two-sided letter to a loved one from someone who became infected and knew they didn't have much time left. The reason I wanted to bring up collectibles in this game is because they add to the world and make it feel full. Sure, I could walk in an apartment and see some corpses, but what if I read a note too that says why those corpses are there? This extra information makes the world feel alive in ways that I truly enjoy, but it's not an absolutely huge part of the game, I'd say, just extra niceness. So I'll give it 65 points. We see all the time when you get to the end of a console generation, you begin to finally see the absolute best of the console. Developers are comfortable with the tech involved and are able to really push hard to make a great game that also looks great. With The Last of Us Part 2 coming out in the middle of the same year the PS5 is rumored to be released, it absolutely follows that pattern and is an absolutely beautiful game. Something as simple as walking crouched in the grass is awesome to watch, let alone the snowy scenery of Jackson or the flooded parts of Seattle. There are also a lot of little details, like signs in the hospital for example. The last thing I want to mention about graphics is how seamless they are. You can go from in cutscene to in gameplay with no loading screen, no cuts, no anything. Just a slight camera shift and boom, gameplay. I'm really impressed with the graphics if you couldn't tell, so I'm giving them 98 points. The Last of Us is a great game for coming out in 2013, and for me, The Last of Us Part 2 really just expanded and made the universe even better for me. Now, there was some controversy with this game, I will recognize that, but for me, that controversy didn't really come up. I didn't have any issue with any of the characters in the game, and I just thought the story and the game itself was really good, and so that's why I gave the story 87 points, the gameplay 81 points, the collectibles 65 points, and the graphics 98 points, bringing us to a total of 331 points. This brings us just below the game I reviewed last week, Persona 5 Royal, but just above Death Stranding, and so The Last of Us Part 2 is at number 4 in my game list. But hey, thanks so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you like what I do, hit the subscribe button, give me a like on this video if you thought it was any good. Maybe leave a comment, tell me some other games you'd like to see me play. Otherwise, I'll have my Twitter in the description of this video, so go follow me there, you get random updates about what I'm doing. But hey, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I hope you have a good one.